This time we are in Mountain View in the CloudOn office with Milind. Milind, who are you and what do you do?
I'm the founder and CEO of CloudOn. Just a little bit on maybe my background. Have been in the Valley for 25 years,
Wow.
so I've been here for a long time. And fortunately for me, I got my first taste of entrepreneurship about 20 years back. About 20 years back. A company called At Home Network.
Mm-hmm.
At Home was the first broadband service provider in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Joined the product team very early on. Company did extremely well. We were at one point looking to acquire either Yahoo or Excite.
Wow.
And we acquired Excite, and so it was right company, right place, and gave me a really good taste of what does it take to be in an early stage startup, and that has the potential of huge impact. And so soon after that, I ended up joining a company called ePinions. ePinions was literally the first user-generated content site. This was at the peak of the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran product there. And once again, incredible rush in being able to kind of have that impact and give people a voice to be able to share their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
A little early for the market for a time. Company eventually did go public and did well, but I had left well before then. And then finally, my third startup was a company called PCube, which was an Israeli startup in the networking space.
Okay.
And that company ended up staying the longest. It was selling into the service providers with the whole vision that the future of the internet was meant to be, richer from a user and a content standpoint, and how do you leverage the network to make that possible. Company was acquired by Cisco. I stayed at Cisco for 4 or 5 years, and at some point had the itch that it was time to leave the big company and go and do something myself, right? In all the previous 3 companies, I was always part of part of the management team, having a fair amount of influence, but never where I was at the head of the table.
Right.
And so at some point, when I realized that I still had the energy and the craziness to go start something, decided to start. So this was in 2009. Mm-hmm. End of 2009, I left Cisco, and I partnered with a couple of my co-founders who were based in Israel, mm-hmm. and we said, let's go tackle kind of the next frontier, right? So we wanted to clearly get away from networking, and as we looked at the space, then we definitely felt that the intersection of cloud and mobile mm-hmm. was going to generate a fair amount of disruption.
Okay.
We were coming at it without a lot of experience in this space, mm-hmm. but with the belief that we know what it takes to kind of go identify a problem. And the first year was fairly difficult, I have to say. It was, to some extent, a technology looking for a problem, mm-hmm. and which is always one of the lessons, or not the best way to start a company, but but we had some good technology and we went down a certain path. And fortunately for us, the iPad launched during that first year. So when we started the company, we had no anticipation of the tablet market. We definitely knew that the smartphones were going to become kind of the default computing device in mm-hmm. everybody's hand, but the tablet clearly kind of changed the landscape. And so we jumped on the tablet bandwagon fairly quickly, and have to say the rest is history, because we've had a phenomenal last 3 years. Mm-hmm. And the goal of the company, as when we first started and kind of went down this path, our claim to fame initially was very much about providing access to Microsoft Office on the iPad. So this was January 5th, 2012 when we launched. Mm-hmm. We had no anticipation. We had developed an app that provided access to Dropbox, and then if you wanted to edit your Office documents, we gave you access to Microsoft Office. And in the first 12 hours, it became the #1 app on the App Store, which took us by surprise, because our goals were couple of thousand people in the first month, maybe 100,000 in 1 year. We did 100,000 in the first 36 hours.
Wow.
And so we were addressing a major pain point that users had, right? Which they wanted to use their tablets as a productivity device. And until then, the iPad was a phenomenal consumption device, right? Every app was much more around gaming or entertainment or consumption. There really wasn't anything around productivity. I think the closest productivity app one could consider would be email, right? But email was consuming email, not necessarily productivity. And we had been in discussion with a lot of the large US enterprises. And when the iPad came out, they all kind of gave us the same kind of use case, which was, we want this to be a great productivity device. This is a game changer device in the enterprise. And we want to make it productivity. And when we would ask, what do you mean by productivity? The answer was, we would love to be able to work with Office documents, Word files, Excel files, PowerPoint, files. And so our first step was really about providing access to Office with Dropbox as the storage backend. When we saw the success we had in the US, we just, initially was, it made sense, right? We're going after, there's a massive pain point, but we didn't know whether we just got lucky. And so we had initially just launched in the US. And so we launched in the Canadian market, and the same thing happened, which was first day, #1 app on the App Store, no marketing, no promotions, right? Just completely word of mouth. And so after that, we launched this in the UK, and exactly the same, right? It was perfectly same in the US, Canada, UK, where in every market we would launch within the first 12 to 48 hours, it would become the #1 app on the App Store, right? And not in productivity or business, overall App Store. So this was us, and then there would be 9 games or some. And at that point, we realized that the market or the users had spoken. They were looking to truly be productive on their iPads. And there was a lot of requests for iPhone, a lot of requests for Android. And so so this was in early 2012. We made a conscious decision as a company saying that there's an opportunity to redefine mobile productivity. And when we thought about what does mobile productivity mean, it's really about redefining how do people create content, share content, work with content in ways that they've never done before. And so we were ambitious, some people think I'm crazy, to literally take on the incumbents and the establishment in redefining the future of productivity.
Great.
And so that's the short story of who I am and where we are in this journey.
Great. Milind, you said that when you entered the market, you didn't have any clue about how the market was working. How did you set you up the journey for learning and understanding how the market really works?
So we had some clue, so I'll give credit to my head of product, Jay, who's my co-founder, who was adamant about serving the needs of the users. We had heard from the various enterprises of what they wanted, right? They wanted the ability for their employees to be able to work with Office documents on the iPad, right? That was the problem statement that was provided. And now one could say there's multiple ways to tackle this problem. The way we did it is we decided to virtualize Microsoft Office and make it available to these users. But the insight or the point my co-founder Jay made was nobody is buying an iPad to get a Windows experience. If they're buying an iPad, they want an iOS experience. And so the big challenge for us was, how do you take a Windows app and make it as iOS-like as possible?
Like
right?
Apple beautiful.
Exactly, right? And so it is like taking a square peg and trying to put it into a round hole, because it's an app that was developed for a PC, for a mouse-based and a keyboard. It wasn't developed for a gesture-based experience. And that was, I would say, kind of, the insights that we had, which was it's all about the user experience. And if we get the right user experience, people will use it. And I think that is what we got right. Like when we first did it, right, was we nailed the user experience, where we tried to hide as much of Windows or that traditional Microsoft Office experience from users to give them the ability to just work with their documents. And looking back, we did that just perfectly. So.
Great. Milind, let's talk about the business model. Is it still the case that CloudOn only helps people creating, sharing Microsoft Office products on several devices, or is there some other point in terms of productivity included?
So for us, the focus is very much around the documents that the users have, right? Like there are, when we look at the productivity ecosystem in the PC generation, over 1 billion users using Microsoft Office, trillions of artifacts getting created on an annual basis around the world, right? These are Word files, Excel files, PowerPoint files. And so for us, it wasn't about let's go create a new different type of experience. It was very much about let's embrace the Office format. Fortunately for us, the European Union in 2007 forced Microsoft to open the Office format, and it's an open published format.
But only for the EU or worldwide?
Worldwide,
okay.
on a worldwide basis. And so this enabled us to kind of recognize that Office is the gold standard for productivity on the PC.
Right.
And so from that standpoint, how do we leverage that format and kind of work with, we don't want to change people's behavior, right? Like, then this is where I think many companies try, get it wrong. User behavior is very difficult to change. And so one really needs to embrace that and then extend from there. And so we're not trying to get users to say, let's go abandon all your Office documents and come learn a new tool that is mobile first. We've always said it is important to embrace the legacy world, but to provide a path into the future, right? And so from a business model perspective, we are huge believers that it's an end user market. Eventually, the problem that we're trying to solve in productivity, it's an enterprise use case, right? But when we think about the enterprise, we say that the enterprise is changing today. End users are deciding which applications to use, how to use it, how to pay for it. And so for us, we've made a conscious decision very early on to follow a freemium model. The freemium model is based on providing kind of a free service to bulk of our users. If we can get less than 10% to convert into paying users, that would be a really good model. But with the expectation that over time, and this is a multi-year journey, we would want to cater to teams of users and eventually to the enterprise IT administrator, right? Because eventually this is an enterprise use case, but it's an enterprise use case that is driven by the end user. And we've gotten lots of inbound requests from a lot of the large US enterprises of wanting to have an enterprise version of CloudOn. And so far we've been very end user focused to say, let's build CloudOn Pro, which is much more end user focused, with a clear roadmap to eventually get to a Teams product and eventually an enterprise product.
Okay, great. Milind, in terms of corporate strategy, as I perceive your business model is highly dependent on Microsoft products because you are building an additional layer on them. How do you respond to a question like what happens if Microsoft would be doing something similar?
So this has been the question that has been posed consistently, right? During the initial years when we were successful, is eventually Microsoft is going to release Office on iOS or Android, and what happens to CloudOn? We've always assumed that is going to be the case. We have never assumed that, from our perspective, if you look at the productivity market today, you've got three very large, well-established companies, Microsoft, Google, and Apple, who have their own productivity suites. When we look at them, each one of them started off with their roots catering to a PC model. Looking at it very much from kind of a PC mouse-based paradigm. They've tried to make it mobile, or they've tried to make it gesture-friendly, but it still is a PC experience, right? It's very much a menu-driven experience. Okay. If you look at Microsoft Office on the iPad, it's done extremely well, but it's still a familiar experience. And when we think about the future, we say that it has to be, for anybody to kind of truly create or reimagine or redefine the future of the document, it has to be a mobile first, or even precisely a gesture first experience. The days of menus are over, right? It should all be based on the fingertip. Okay. You shouldn't say, if I want to insert a chart or I want to insert an object, you pick a menu and then you go down to a different menu item and pick that. You should be able to just draw it with your finger. Okay. And so from our standpoint, we've always felt that the gesture first or kind of mobile experience is key. What's key, the other aspects which is important, is the ability to be compatible with Office, right? Office is, as I said earlier, kind of the gold standard in the enterprise for productivity. And so if I look at Google Docs, or if I look at iWorks from Apple, they've created their own silos, right? Which is their application, their format, their storage. We've approached our strategy saying, let's embrace the Office format. We will also embrace other formats like the ODF format from the Document Foundation, and so we will embrace other formats instead of defining our own proprietary format, but really focus on the user experience, and then focus on innovating in areas that none of the incumbents have innovated, which is about how do you make it truly a social document, how do you make it a living document. How do you make it truly workable on an iPhone or on an Android phone with a 4-inch form factor, right? We want to make people as productive on those devices as they are on their PCs, and it's a non-trivial problem to solve, but we are well on our way to solve it.
What are your thoughts on adding other platforms? As you described, you have 3 major players currently working in this kind of online document market. What keeps you from only sticking with the Microsoft Office product? Why? What are the thoughts on entering new markets like Google and iWorks?
So for us, what we're doing is we're embracing the Office format, just because there's 1 billion people in the enterprise who are currently using Office, but we are building our own native authoring capabilities. And so from our standpoint, we will integrate with Google Drive, we will integrate with Microsoft's OneDrive, we will integrate with iCloud. So we are approaching this more like a Switzerland-like approach, which is we are truly storage agnostic. We'll integrate with Dropbox. Like Dropbox is a really strong partner of ours. With Box, which is another strong partner. So we'll integrate with multiple storage providers. We will try to integrate with other silos and truly create value for the end user, right? Because today when we talk to our end users, they value us for our open approach. They value us for the fact that they can continue to use Google Drive and OneDrive and Dropbox and Box and not have to be forced. Because if you're on Google Docs, you have to use Google Drive. If you're on iWorks, you have to use iCloud. If you're on Microsoft Office, you have to use OneDrive. And so we've approached it saying we want to be truly platform agnostic or technology agnostic from that standpoint. Similar to what Dropbox did, when they built their initial cloud storage, right? They said we will embrace Windows, Mac OS, Android, and hence they've been incredibly successful. So.
From my point of view, one of the major market trends has been like from the PC device based operating systems to now going to mobile, going to the cloud. What other trends did you identify in the market?
So clearly mobile is, it's a huge
trend.
It's a huge tsunami that's kind of happening, which we are riding. The consumerization of IT, right, which is the true, I would say, before, and I've been around the block, for all these years, where IT would tell you exactly what to use, what you could not use. They controlled the device, right? So if I had a PC from the company, they would tell me which applications could run on it, how it would work. Those days are over to some extent. What we call it as the consumer enterprise, right? Because the enterprise still exists, but the end users who are consumers are making their own choice, right? They are deciding which applications they want. And also the enterprise is no longer confined to the borders of the enterprise, right? It's truly a borderless enterprise, because I could be collaborating, like let's say I'm a finance person and I'm working on a spreadsheet. I could be collaborating with my auditor who is in a different company. I am working with some other services. And so it's becoming much more of an open environment. And anybody coming new into this has to be able to embrace that, right? And this is where I believe the incumbents are at a disadvantage. All the large incumbents are catering to a world that worked 20 years ago. That world has completely changed, right? And the question is, are they going to be able to adapt, or will newcomers like Dropbox, CloudOn, Box, others kind of come in and grab market share?
Milind, you have seen so many stuff in your former startups and this startup. What have been your major learnings over the years that you can share with other first-time entrepreneurs so they make less errors?
When I look back at kind of my career, and I said I have learned a lot. They had the hard way. I wish I had some guidance earlier on. When we started CloudOn, it was very important to me to really define what was the goal that we were setting out as co-founders, right? Are we looking to go solve a problem and sell it to the first buyer? Are we looking to go change the world, right? And there, and there's no right answer. It very much depends on the entrepreneur themselves, right? There are some people, and I've seen this, who are looking to go, make a quick dollar, right? They'll start a company with the ability that we want to flip it. They know exactly who's the buyer, and that's great, right? They know exactly what they're paying. In our situation, we were much more, dreamers, thinkers of saying we wanted to go change the world. We wanted to redefine the future of productivity. And so understanding that goal is critical, because one thing that I have learned is with how much ever planning, how much ever thinking that one does, the path is not a straight path, right? It is a path with gazillion obstacles and will keep on changing on a daily basis. So if you know what the goal is,
let's figure out.
You can work towards that goal, right? That's important. I would say for any kind of first-time entrepreneur, entrepreneurship is a team sport. It's not an individual sport, right? People might look at individuals and say, typically there's always a face of the company, but behind that face there is a team. And the team, whether it's a team of co-founders or it's that initial team of people that you build, is the most important, because again, given it's not a straight path, you need the versatility, you need the ability to kind of zigzag depending on what obstacles you come across. And having the right team that has the right risk profile, that's not going to get afraid if the first obstacle comes up, that has the right kind of dedication, right? It's the most difficult sport or the most difficult work you're ever going to do, but it's also going to be the most fun. And so it's not for everybody, right? I sit here in the valley and I see that because, for every, one successful company, it spawns, 100 would-be entrepreneurs, and then they all realize it's really difficult, they get disillusioned. I always say that if entrepreneurship was easy, you'd find a lot more success. So it's extremely challenging. And so I would say that, having the right team, because this is not a sprint, right? It's like, and I'm sure you've heard this before, right? It's a marathon. And, so having the right team that can help pace, that can help create the right energy is by far the most important. It's not about the idea, right? And I hate saying this to people. We have zigged and zagged as a company before. You hear about all these companies, even whether it's Facebook's or any of the other companies, they've started off with one idea and then they morphed into another idea. What's important beyond the team, I would say, is playing in a big market, right? So, like for example, we are playing in the market of productivity. Productivity is a $100 billion opportunity.
Right.
We may not get it right the first time, but it's a big enough market that if we keep on digging, we will find oil, or we'll find gold, or we'll find we'll solve that problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
So if you end up picking a very niche kind of area, it becomes difficult to change direction because you're kind of tied down. And again, all depends on what the goal is, right? So our goal was we wanted to change the world, we wanted to have huge impact, so we picked a bigger market to play. And then finally, and this maybe goes to the earlier team aspect, there's a certain aspect of perseverance. All the gray hairs out here are tied to perseverance, because there are more people who will say it's not possible. There are more people who will be doubters, who will be naysayers of why something cannot be done, right? You look at any example of all the successful companies that are out there today, they've all faced their obstacles, they've all faced their people who've doubted that they would ever be successful, but they persevered and they eventually were successful. So I would say, I would come back to kind of maybe summarize this to say, key is having the right team, playing in the right space that's big enough where one can change, and then just having the stamina and the perseverance. Do not give up, right? It's the best job that if you've got the stomach for it, it's absolutely the best job on the planet, but it's not the easiest. It's not for everybody. But I would encourage you, live once. You might as well, may have the biggest impact you can have with your life. So
I think this is a very good summary and closing. Thank you very much, Milind, for your time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much.